Good evening, everyone. I invite you to take a seat. If you are getting food in the back, that is perfectly fine. Take your time. We don't want anyone to be hungry. But I want to be the first to officially wish you a good evening and welcome you to the 6th annual Warren Bennis Leadership Experience. I am Alex Mason, the president of the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience, and it is my absolute honor and pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. The Warren Bennis Leadership Experience, or WBLE for short, is an annual event designed to develop students into leaders through the teachings and principles of Warren Bennis. This event is put on by a student-run and student-led organization that makes all of this possible tonight. Each year, we bring renowned leaders to campus to talk about principles of leadership that can be applied in the classroom as well as in the professional workplace. We have brought in people like Daniel Goleman, Paul Pullman, Tom Peters, Doris Kearns Goodwin, David Gergen, Myron Ullman, and Howard Schultz. Our ultimate goal is to create a leadership movement here on campus, and tonight, this whole room is filled with people making that dream possible. So we are so excited that you are here and being a part of this leadership movement. Betsy Myers, our speaker today, has been all over campus meeting with students. She had a women's event in the morning, meeting with important faculty, important alumni, and other student leaders as well. We also had a fireside chat with some intimate time where some students were able to ask Betsy Myers questions. So it has been awesome to have you here on campus, Betsy, and it is just my pleasure to have you all here this evening. Tonight, you will get a video of Warren Bennis to start. You will get an introduction from Warren's daughter, Kate Bennis. You will hear about students who exemplify what it means to be a leader, as well as honoring them by giving out some awards. Then we will have our keynote presentation by Dean Marianne Lewis and by Betsy Myers. Then that will be followed by some small group discussions in your table groups. We want to make this as interactive as possible and really make it an experience for you. And finally, you will learn about a leadership institute that is being born here on Cincinnati's campus. Before I go any further, I do have some very important people I need to thank because without them, tonight would not be possible. So I have a big list of names. So if you could just hold your applause until the end, that would be greatly appreciated. So first, I want to thank the director, the academic director of the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience and the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute, and that is Dr. Donna Crobot-Mason. I want to thank Dean Marianne Lewis for all that she has done in this as well. I want to thank our amazing speaker tonight, Betsy, for coming all the way from Boston and to speaking with us tonight and caring so deeply about our students here at Cincinnati. I want to thank the entire friends and family group of Warren Bennis, including Warren Bennis's daughter and granddaughter here tonight. It is such a privilege to be hosting you guys at this event and to be able to carry on Warren's legacy through your stories. I want to thank the UC Foundation and all of our donors for making this possible financially. I want to give a very special thank you to our WBLE founder, Jack Fitzgerald. Without him, tonight would also not be here. And finally, I just want to give one huge thank you to the student team who I've had the privilege and honor of working alongside for this entire past year. They have worked tirelessly to put on this event, to do so much for this university. So can we give it up for all of these amazing people? These past few weeks, I've been doing a lot of reading of Warren Bennis's book. I've been listening to speakers talk about him. I've been listening to stories. I got dinner last night with Betsy Myers and got to hear some amazing stories from her, hearing stories from Kate, and just really soaking in all of who Warren Bennis is. I found a lot of stories about a man who was a 19-year-old serving in World War II, leading his entire platoon at just 19 years old. A man who became the president here at UC and led us to new heights that no one thought was possible by putting us as a part of the public state institution. A man who had students over to his house to have deep intellectual conversation and actually cared about what the students had to say at the university. A man who later went on to become the president of USC and lead that university into many great endeavors. A man who wrote 30 books on leadership with some amazing ideas and such profound ideas that he gained the nickname the father of leadership. A man who was admired and loved by his friends, family, and colleagues. Now, I never got the pleasure of meeting Warren Bennis, but I feel like I know him. I feel like I have got to meet him personally through all of the stories. I'm inspired by him. I'm motivated by him. I'm captivated by him. And this is not because of these accolades or these lists of great accomplishments that I read off, but it's because of who he was and because of all the stories I have heard about him. It's the stories that are being carried on today, the legacy that is being carried on today. Tonight, you will hear from Warren Bennis in a video recorded of him. You will hear from his daughter. You will hear from Betsy Myers, who knew him personally. I hope that you can listen to these stories and get to know Warren as I have gotten to know him through these stories. Warren challenged others to look at life differently, to look at experiences and interactions differently. Kate was talking, and this is great that I had a quote about this, but Charles Handy, one of Warren's great friends, an extremely successful colleague as well, described this enigma that Warren had on people, this effect that he had. And it said that is Warren's huge gift, his ability to transform experience into wisdom. That was one of Warren's greatest strengths and greatest lessons, was learning to look and reflect on experiences in a new way that transformed into growth and wisdom. My favorite quote from Warren Bennis is becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. And for me, this has completely rang true. So 5 years ago, I got involved with the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience as a senior in high school. And I basically got dragged into it. I didn't want to show up, but I got dragged into volunteering. And I came into that night as an unengaged, uninvolved, unmotivated, honestly quite shy high school student. That night, I spent time sprinting around the campus that I had never been to find David Gergen a coffee, and then to find David Gergen an Uber, which was way harder. This night that was on the surface somewhat monotonous, doing a lot of running around, a lot of stress, it completely changed my life and the way that I view things. If you look at just the facts, it doesn't get you to that point. But if you look at the energy that I felt in the room, the experience of hearing from such amazing speakers, of learning from Warren, feeling the passion, being a part of a team, it changed the way I view myself, the way I view my experiences, the way I create my goals. It changed the way I view conversations with strangers, the way I view relationships with people, and the way I look to lead others as well. Warren taught me that night to really prioritize knowing myself and who I am and how that translates into action and leadership. Tonight, I invite you, be inspired by these speakers, be inspired by Warren Bennis. Don't make tonight just some monotonous event that you attended, but make it a true experience. I believe that this room is filled with leaders. I strongly believe that Cincinnati is filled with amazing people who can change the world. I believe that there are students here who can start a leadership movement here in Cincinnati. Warren wrote in all of his books about how desperately we needed leaders. And I guarantee you, most of you would agree with him. We need leaders in this country, in this city, in this world. And as I look around this room at individual faces, I know that there are stories waiting to be told. There are lives waiting to be changed. There are smiles that are on the other end of that and that are waiting for something amazing to happen. There are people here who can change the world, and I want each and every one of you to believe in that. As you listen and discuss tonight, take the step and take a deeper look at the stories being told and how it affects your life. Lastly, I hope tonight challenges, inspires, encourages, and ultimately aids you in your development to become the best leader and the best person that you can possibly be. I invite you to check out this video of Warren.
During the Depression years, growing up in a family that was struggling gave me a proper sense of identifying, understanding what I would have to do to make it in this world. And that's the work ethic, it's integrity, collaboration, those things, right? I just mentioned. I realized that if I were to succeed, those are the things that are important, that work ethic, integrity, and collaboration. I guess I also grew up, Tom, at a point in our history where the shadow of Hitler and how destructive these dictators were, I realized that leadership can stain a nation's history, stain a corporation's reputation. What more important thing can I be looking at? I wasn't particularly gifted or as a scientist or an engineer. I couldn't do that kind of thing. I knew that. But what could be more important if you're interested in organizations and the leadership of these institutions? I would not be the scholar I am today were it not for my years at Cincinnati. They were the most important learning years of my life, Tom. Everything that I did as the president, my eyebrows were always raised in trying to understand it. I also learned something about collaboration, modesty, and abdication of one's ego. How do we develop the idea of the commons, that we're all in this together, and each of us may have to give a little bit for the common good? In the Middle East, they have a phrase about leaders who don't listen. They say they have tired ears. That leads to revolt. People aren't listening. And if you put that in a microcosm of the university during that period, to know that the administration, not just Warren Bennis, were listening. I think leadership brings out character. I think I learned who I was, what my voice was. I think it's influenced almost every aspect of my life, from how I use my time, effort, creativity, collegiality, judgments I make. Also, it gives me a lens by which I now examine quality of leadership. The quality of a leader usually accounts for 20 to 25% of the success of the company, using any metric you want. Once you make a distinction between, as I did, between leaders versus managers, and wrote about, in the book Unbecoming a Leader, wrote about a dozen plus distinctions, ending up with one: managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. Well, think about it. Do you know they're both important? But the leader is the one who inspires, who sets the mission and the vision, has the ideas. But there's a big but there. But they subordinate their ego to the talents of others. Riding the hyphen. That's a phrase I invented for what is important today in today's university. How do we get our students to know a discipline really well and to be also a generalist? You cannot be transformational if you're not hyphenated. I think a big part of leadership, Tom, is the capacity to engage people, the capacity to have this kind of conversation. See, I've always defined boredom. This is really a conceit, which I'm not going to give up. I think boredom is when I can't make the person I'm sitting next to interesting. Isn't that narcissistic? I mean, but that's what I really believe. The main thing about leadership is managing yourself. So the first part of emotional wisdom, who you are, how aware you are, how you affect others. Leadership, if nothing else, is about a relationship. It's what it is. Leadership is very simple, made too complex by people who write about it, including me. It consists of three things: a person who's designated as leader, a goal, and a relationship with somebody. If you look at people who fail at leadership, I would say 9 or 8 out of 10 times, it's not their technical competence, it's their emotional wisdom. When I left in 77, I felt that I'm leaving a place where the judgment about my leadership would have to be made years after. When I said earlier that I'm proud to be part of the narrative of the University of Cincinnati, I'm glad I've been part of that history.
What a truly amazing video. There's so many things that you can take from that video. My name is Matthew Toigo. I'm the Vice President of the Warren Bennis Leadership Experience this year. And one of my favorite quotes from that is, "My eyebrows were always raised in trying to understand the work ethic, integrity, and collaboration. If I were to succeed, those are the things that are important." It is my pleasure to introduce Warren Bennis's daughter, Kate Bennis. She is a professional actor and a clinical social worker who draws from the skills and techniques of the theater, therapeutic training, and years of experience to give her clients everything they need to communicate as their fullest, most perfectly imperfect selves. Kate has coached senior and mid-level leaders at American Express, AOL, Deloitte, the Federal Reserve, CIA, University, Columbia University, and so many others. You can see the heart of Warren Bennis through Kate. Please help me welcome Kate Bennis.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Hi. I am so glad that I got to see that video again. And I have to tell you, I watched it quite a few times because as I told Tom Humes, who is here and was the interviewer, I heard things that I'd never heard him actually say, and I'd never actually read them. He put them in a different way because it was specifically for this audience, for you. It was for Cincinnati, for the University of Cincinnati, for his time here. And the interviewer is here tonight. And I just want to say thank you, Tom, for making that happen, that we have that record. It was just beautiful. And I have a conceit that I know what my dad would say right now. And the first thing he would say is thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for keeping these ideas alive and going. I think they are more important than anything right now. And I know that he really deeply felt that the thing that he did best was teach. And that the thing that he was best was a teacher. So you, the students, are the most important thing to him, honestly. And I loved the introduction. It was so beautiful talking about leaders in this room, right? There are leaders in this room. So thank you, Alex. The other thing that really, so I want to continue to thank people. This is what my dad would do. He would want to thank Dean Lewis. He would want to thank Dr. Crobot Mason. He would want to thank Jay Chatterjee, who's here, who was a dear friend, and Diane Fishbein, who was my mom's closest friend. All the people who've come out, my old babysitters who lived at our house. We lived in a huge house on the hill. We had 22 students live there during all the years, at least 3 at a time, because my mother thought that maybe someone would be watching us, which was not the case because it was the 70s. But a few of those babysitters are here tonight. There were also colleagues treated as colleagues by my father, who had students come with him to every kind of meeting you could imagine. He invited them to live with us and to drive him around. And we have Neil Novak, and we have Bruce Hopple here, and we have Joni Linhart, who also was a babysitter of mine and lived at our house. So I just want to say thank you for all of these people, because they are the people who are the spark behind this idea that there could be a Warren Bennis Leadership Institute at the university. They made this happen by just thinking about it and talking about it a lot. So thank you, guys. The other thing I just was thinking about watching this is that he talks about, to be a successful person, you need 3 things: a work ethic, right? Integrity. And what I think he means by integrity here, I'm going to have the conceit that I know what he means, is that it is for him follow through and staying integritous to your word, right? So finishing things. He always said, I would never hire somebody who wouldn't finish things, right? It doesn't feel like they're going to actually finish it. And the third piece was collaboration. And this group of students who put this together blow my mind. Can people stand up, all the people who volunteered and who had anything to do with creating this event? This is a hard thing to do. Look, they're all in the back there. Look at this. I mean, just wonderful work. Thank you. Thank you. The other thing he talks about was this idea of managing ourselves, right? He said, I have to manage myself, where I put my time and energy, what I use my judgment for. How do I use my creativity and collegiality? He talks about that piece of the relationship. And the last thing he spoke about was that we are all in this together for the common good, to remind us that we are doing this for each other and to give a little bit more than we have, right? The sense of service. He really believed in that, having served in the Army. He also said we must listen. We must not have tired ears. And the third piece was modesty, sublimating our own ego to the bigger good, right? And those 3 things, he said, were emotional wisdom. And when I think about emotional wisdom, I think about the people who are going to be speaking here later tonight. And I think about the 3 students who we are now going to honor, who have, well, I'll read exactly what it says. I'm not going to make this up. Okay. My dad would have made it up. All right, I'm going to actually read it. Warren Bennis believed, my dad, believed in the adage that great leaders are not born, but made. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can learn it. Anybody can do it. Interesting that, insisting that the process of becoming a leader is similar, if not identical, to fully becoming an integrated human being. Both, he said, were grounded in self-discovery. For the first time, the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute was extremely excited to put into effect an application for the Leaders Are Made Award, which I love that title, to honor and continue the legacy of Warren Bennis. A $500 scholarship has been granted to 3 award winners. After receiving over 80 applicants and so many amazing entries, we identified 3 leaders who embodied these qualities, and they are to do the right thing. To do the right thing. Managers are people who do things right, and leaders are people who do the right thing. They challenge the status quo. A manager accepts the status quo, a leader challenges it. They translate vision into reality. A leadership is the capacity, he said, these are all quotes from him, to translate vision into reality. They make people feel that they're at the very heart of things. Quote, good leaders make people feel that they are the very heart of things, not on the periphery. You are the important ones. We all are. They ask how and why. But the manager asks how and when. The leader asks what and why. So the first award, and Matt's going to come up with these awards that are so beautiful. So I'm going to say this name, and I want you to pronounce it correctly for me. I tried to find you beforehand. Rigby Zemichael. Rigby Zemichael. Come on up. Where's Rigby Zemichael? Rigby Zemichael is a 5th-year marketing and fine arts student. She has been involved in the transitions cohort as well as Delta Sigma Theta sorority. She was also a base mentor. Come on up. President of Zeta and the treasurer of UC National Pan-Hellenic Council. Rigby wrote about her mother and said, I will only accept growth moving forward because I've gotten here because of the resiliency of my mother and has shown me in her life and instilled in me. Maya Angelou once said, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. Is your name, can you pronounce your name?
Rigby.
Rigby.
Zemichael.
Zemichael. What a beautiful name. Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you. Congratulations. All right. And the next winner is Austin Castle. And I'm going to read this as you come up. Where's Austin? Is Austin here? Yay, come on up. Austin Castle is a 2nd-year finance and marketing student. Austin is very involved and is the VP of membership for Queen City Consulting, the treasurer of Clean Up Cincy. My mom would have loved you. Oh my goodness. And the director of outreach for the Lindner Student Association. Austin wrote about what it means to be a leader. Through one of his experiences, he wrote, leadership is not about being the best knowledgeable or skilled member of a team, but rather about empowering and supporting others to work together towards a common goal. Absolutely. I also learned that leadership is a continuous process of growth and development, requiring ongoing self-reflection and a willingness to learn from mistakes. Austin's ultimate goal in his career is to make an impact on the environment through sustainability, which has been his passion ever since a young age. While he still has plenty of time to decide, he believes that starting his career in consulting will give him the tools and foundation necessary to accomplish his goal. Hey, congratulations. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And the last recipient is Sarah Hassan, and you can start coming up. Sarah Hassan is a first-year medical science major with a minor in public health and psych on the pre-med track. Sarah has started her college career being very involved. She is a member of UC Refuge, Muslim Student Association, and Arab Student Association. Sarah is also a Crossroads intern. Sarah wrote about Dr. Mira Adele Logan, who was the first African-American female to perform open heart surgery. Sarah wrote, women's rights have inspired me to become co-chair of an organization all about empowering women and the president of my school's Girl Up Club. As a future physician, it is important to me to take on injustices that are found in the medical field. One day, Sarah hopes to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. Yay. Hi, so glad to meet you. I'm so glad you could make it. Did you get your award? Aren't these beautiful awards and incredible people? Let's give them all a big hand. I'm so glad that you guys have started doing this here, because I think that to start recognizing each other, you'll see, oh, all these leaders right here. It's astonishing. Now I'm going to introduce two leaders who truly have that emotional wisdom that my father spoke of in the film. I can't say enough about Dr. Dean Lewis. I don't know, was it Dean first or Doctor first? Dr. Dean, Dean Lewis, Dr. Lewis. And the way that he has, when that piece about integrity, there is a sense of complete openness. She has invited my family in. She has wanted to hear everything that we have to say. She has listened so deeply and so carefully while still having the true north vision for this institute and for what it would need, and then finding the right leadership with Dr. Crobot Mason, right? To really have that sense with an absolute sense of openness. I just don't think I've ever seen that in a leader, unafraid to hear every answer, unafraid, inviting the questions in and listening. That is one thing that I would call integrity. And it also harkens back to the part where he talks about leaders not listening. This is a leader who listens. Dr. Mary Ann Lewis is Dean and Professor of Management at the Carl H. Lindner College of Business at the University of Cincinnati. Previously, she served as Dean of the Cass Business School, City University of London, and as UK Fulbright Scholar. A thought leader in organizational paradoxes, she is among the world's top 1% most cited researchers in her field, appearing in such journals as the Harvard Business Review, Academy of Management Journal, Organizational Science, and Journal of Operations Management. Her research explores tensions and competing demands surrounding leadership and innovation. She applies her paradox lens across diverse contexts as product development, organizational change, governance, and technology implementation. Lewis also recently published her first book, Both and Thinking, which is about that paradox, that tension, an insightful and inspiring book on using both and thinking to make more creative, flexible, and impactful decisions in a world of competing demands. Thank you. Come on up, Dean Lewis. And I want to introduce my dear friend and I feel like I've met some of the most deepest friendships that I've made posthumously through my parents. Like after they died, I still am meeting the most amazing people. And though I'd met Betsy before Dad died, I got to know her recently. And so it feels like a kind of another daughter that he had, right? We're around the same age. They worked together deeply. They spoke all the time. And it's amazing to me I didn't get to know her until recently. Also, a leader with emotional wisdom. So Betsy Myers is a leadership expert, author, speaker, consultant, and colleague and dear friend of Warren Bennis and mine. Betsy speaks and leads workshops around the world on the changing nature of leadership. Her book, Take the Lead, Motivate, Inspire, and Bring Out the Best in Yourself and Everyone Around You, continues on the basis of her work as her experience spans corporate, political, and higher education arenas. A senior advisor to 2 U.S. presidents, Betsy served as President Clinton's advisor on women's issues and was Chief Operating Officer of President Obama's 2008 National Presidential Campaign. She also held leadership roles in the U.S. Small Business Administration. In 2011, Betsy was appointed founding director of the Center for Women in Business at Bentley University. In 2003, Betsy served as executive director for the Center for Public Leadership at Harvard's Kennedy School with both my father, when he was on the board, and David Gergen, who spoke here right before COVID, the year before COVID, right? We're so happy to have her here. During her tenure, Betsy focused the center's teaching and research around authentic inner leadership, which is, I think, what you'll be hearing about today. A public service fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School, Betsy graduated with a master's in public administration, and here she is. So do you guys need this? No.
Sorry about that. Hello, hello. Come join me. Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here tonight with everyone. Isn't this a great crowd? I know. And we now have an adopted bear cat in Betsy.
First of all, I just I just want to say how happy I am to be here today and just to be part of this event. I just want to give a shout out to Kate Bennis. What a magnificent person you are. And as you said, we've gotten to be close friends. We had met when Warren was alive, but it was afterwards. And when I first started getting to hang around Kate, she has the exact blue eyes as her father had. And it was just, you look at her and it takes you right back to him. But she encompasses really who he was, his heart, his soul. And so it's been a privilege to get to know you, Kate. And Anya, I haven't met you yet, but you also have Warren's blood running through you. So I look forward to meeting you. So I used to say with self-knowledge that Warren, he started talking about self-knowledge was a key piece of leadership way before it was sexy. And, now it's kind of like we talk about self-knowledge a lot in leadership, but he was the first one, 25, 30 years ago that started saying that it starts with self-knowledge. And also that, that leadership is, the same as trying to become a fully integrated human being. And that part of his leadership, I think, is what has become so important today. Because if a leader doesn't know who they are, I think there's two things to leadership and when we think about self-knowledge, which is what gets you to you, what is your authentic self? So what gets you to be your special self? And then what keeps you from being your best self? And I call it, a friend of mine, her name's Rebecca Shambaugh, wrote a book for women's leadership. And it's called, It's Not About the Glass Ceiling, It's a Sticky Floor. And she talks about for women's leadership, which is, have we made progress? Yes. Are we where we should be? No. But we are indeed making progress. But what, as women leaders, what are the behaviors that we sometimes do to keep our feet stuck to the floor? And so I say both men and women have sticky floor behaviors and things that get in our way. And so as leaders, as we grow, we have to be able to understand what is our authentic self, right? Getting us to us, and then what keeps us and what are the behaviors that keep us from being the leader we can, from getting the results that we want.
If I can push on that a bit, I mean, because and in your work, you've written about this as well, the power of leading from your head and your heart, and that to tap into that power takes a really deep self-knowledge, right? To use it to its full effect, to understand your own distinctive skills. But I wondered if you say a little bit more about both the head and the heart and how they work together.
Well, so, I always say that our leadership evolves, and I think Warren would be very much about the head and heart leader today. It's just kind of the new kind of term that you hear a lot: head, heart, hand, head, heart, gut. But what I talk about in my leadership work, which is that you have to have both the head. The head is the strategy, the data, the science, the facts, and that the head part of us is what puts the purpose into your organization. But that's only half the equation, because what puts the passion into your purpose is your people. And those skills that are important for people to follow your vision are things like caring. Do they feel valued? Do they feel listened to? Are you part of the, do you feel part of the team? Do you feel like you matter? When I went to write my book, Warren was very much, a mentor of mine in my journey of my book that came out, been 10 years now. But one of the things we used to talk about, I was always taken aback that 70% of American workers are disengaged in the workplace. And those statistics are still in the recent Gallup poll, 2000, this year, that it's, we're at 34% of people are only engaged in their work. Think about that, 34%. So companies are grappling with a lack of engagement, but a lack of engagement also equals a lack of retention. So companies aren't able to keep their employees, and the millennial generation has shaken everything up on its head. And one of my most favorite articles of all time was in the New York Times last year, January 22, and on the front page of the New York Times business section said, "No more working for jerks." And it had a big male work shoe. And it said, it was all about millennials saying, we're either going to tell you what we think or we're going to leave. So the great resignation, the quiet quitting. And so that's what the work we're doing in leadership in these companies today is, how do you, what I say to leaders is, a lot of you have the strategy, the head, the data down. So don't change that part. It's the and you know about the and in your work. So it's not or, it's and. So then how do we teach leaders today to tap into caring, listening, being vulnerable, being authentic, all the stuff that Warren was circling around for years?
One of Warren's really quite famous statements is that leadership is forged in the crucible. And what he meant by that was, in our very toughest moments, we find our potential to be a leader. We really find our true grit in that response. And as we think about that, for some of you who are learning more about him tonight, and that he was UC's leader, I think about Tom Humes and some of the others who were here. Warren led us from a city municipal university to a state university, a change that was incredibly hard, so hard that it really almost made it impossible to stay after all the hard work, difficult conversations, and then sometimes enemies he had to make in that way. But he knew it would take us to a whole other level. We would never be in this remarkable place if it hadn't been for that crucible moment. And he continued to study that. And I say that both for a history lesson for you on Warren, but also to think about your crucibles as these hard times. And as Betsy, you've worked with some remarkable leaders and yourself had your own crucible moments. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about how to harness those challenges and what that's looked like for you.
So how to harness those crucible moments? Yeah, I mean, it's all, we were talking today, we've had some different conversations about, kind of how that our lives are a journey of self-knowledge and self-understanding, and to be in places, I feel fortunate to have been in places to observe leaders, and then also to observe my own my own leadership route and the mistakes, and discovering who I am. And so I mean, I think we have, and I always say that that if you're going to stick your head up and be a leader, you're going to have more failures than you are successes. And I always say, if you're going to stay safe, then you're going to be average. And if you want to stick your head up to really make change the world, and impact people in a big way, you are going to put yourself in the arena. And the arena is twists and turns and crucible moments and things you didn't maybe foresee. And that's all part of the lessons of what is happening. But it's also part of self-discovery. So, for me, I had a couple crucible moments in my career, but one particularly when I worked for President Obama. I was his chief operating officer for the first presidential campaign. And I went in early in 2007, before anyone thought that Barack Obama could win. He was 30 points behind. And, people would say to me, "Oh my God, I can't believe that, how did you get that job to be Barack Obama's chief operating officer?" And I was like, because no one else wanted it. And because in 2007, early 2007, literally no one thought he could win. And so it was quite the challenge, kind of, and all of a sudden we found ourselves there in Chicago building a campaign and getting office space and trying to raise money. And so it was all of the details, as you can imagine, as a chief operating officer, you're setting up everything from budgets and operations and people and computers and SEC filings and all the stuff. Anyway, but I did that for a year, but I realized that I had a moment where I realized at the end of 2007 that I'm not really a numbers person and a detail person. So I could do the job, and I did the job, but I was at the same time was being called out to the country, to the battleground states, to speak on Senator Obama's leadership, his kind of who he was as a leader, what we did in the campaign, his authenticity, and all that stuff. So I started to go out to the battleground states, and I would go travel around, whatever the team needed me to do, town halls, house parties, difficult constituents, upset supporters, whatever it was. And I was telling this to somebody today. We were talking about this. We were talking about it at lunch. Yeah. And so it was one of those moments, right? Because I had to make a choice. I was either going to keep continuing to go out and be one of the president's or then senator's chief surrogates, or I would stay and continue to be COO. And so it was, but if I knew that I went out into the country, I would leave the power center. And so these are decisions that we make. And the ego would be like, well, you're never going to leave the power center of the campaign to go out into the country. But my heart was like, no, this is where I belong, out with the people, out with the campaign, out with the young people. And that was a crucial moment for me, because I realized I had to take stock of what my skill set was and what gave me energy and where I thought that I could make the biggest contribution. And so we make those decisions, and it changed my life totally, because the irony of the whole thing is that as I traveled around the country speaking about Obama's leadership, it's where I saw the campaign from the bottom up. And I saw the people that had changed their lives to work for him. They were traveling. I was telling the dean today that people would come up to me and say, this is the 5th state I've traveled to. I've liquidated my retirement. I left my job. And I would be like, tell me more, tell me more. And the bottom line was, there was no job promised. There was no tickets to the inauguration promised. There was no salary or bonus or anything at the end of it. There wasn't even a nice dinner promised. But people felt part of something, and they felt like they were growing as human beings and leaders. So had I stayed in Chicago and only seen the campaign from top down, I never would have seen the campaign from bottom up. And that experience changed my life, really, and also was the impetus for my book. So I think that was one of my crucible moments. And I struggle with it, because anytime as a leader that you walk away from the power center, that's a decision that you make that changes everything. But I went towards myself. I went towards my authentic self. And so that's a really good example of.
No, I think that's a beautiful example, and such a challenging pivot point, right? To make that call. A phrase that wasn't in existence when Warren was here, certainly, is around inclusive leadership. And at the same time, he embodied it and taught about it in so many different ways. For those of you like us who are big leadership kind of geeks and read all of the work, I mean, Warren was mentored by Douglas McGregor and really studied the humanity of leadership. And I think maybe he would have used terms like humanity instead of inclusiveness. But I want to dig into that a bit, because the work you've done, particularly around women's leadership, but on many venues, is really about how do you as a leader pull everybody in? You just said kind of from the bottom up, from your heart. There are so many pieces to that. But I wonder if you could talk a bit more about the work that you've done on inclusive leadership and how you've even seen that change over time.
Yeah. So, gosh, inclusive leadership now is such a buzzword, right? It's like diversity, inclusion, and everyone has a D&I strategy, and it's diversity. I always describe it as diversity is access to the people the people that you have to hire, or people that are on your team, that comes in color, size, shape, culture. Inclusion is, how does that diversity succeed in your organization? Do they feel like they're living in an inclusive environment? And the third is, now we've added belonging. So how do you know that your strategy is working? People feel like they belong. And so the world has changed, and companies now are, they want to match their customers. A bank wants to have people that represent the customers. All of the different companies are looking at, wow, if we have, millennial and women customers and people of color or whatever it is, we want to have staff that represents that. But how do you hire, and how do you keep that diverse workplace? And that's the challenge. Sometimes I think we've definitely made progress, but we still have a ways to go. And I think the key thing, I used to always say, if you get your women's advancement strategy right, you'll get every other strategy right. Because if you're creating a culture, it's all about the culture. Last year, in 2022, 45% more women left high growth industries than men. So 45% more women than men left high growth industries, citing the number one reason was lack of culture, bad culture. So that's fascinating, isn't it? Because you can have all the D&I strategy, you can have all the conferences, you can have all this stuff, but if you don't, as an organization, create a culture where people feel that they belong, that they're cared about, that there's a place for them to grow, they'll leave. And the millennials have been really clear about this. I always say the millennials have shaken up the workplace on its head. And, you know, a long time before COVID, I used to say, how many millennials are in the room? Raise your hand. And the funniest thing would happen, the millennials in the room would be like kind of this. And it was like, no. I always say, raise your hand high, because you be proud to be a millennial, because millennials are changing the way we think about work from our generation, which was, well, you're just going to work 90 hours a week and might miss your kid's birthday. And that's the way it goes. But as one client of mine said, the thing about millennials is you can't throw money at them anymore. They want, he was kind of saying it in jest as a head of HR for a global bank. And he's like, yeah, the millennials, you can't just throw a bonus at them. And, but the, other generations you could. So this world, we're definitely making progress, but we definitely have a ways to go. And that's why I champion the head and heart leadership model, because if you don't have leaders who are showing up with care for their people first, you're not going to have a culture that allows people to succeed. And what I think is most interesting about the diversity conversation is this concept of uncovering. So Deloitte Consulting did a study. It's been several years now, but I love it. And it's basically on how much people hide aspects of themselves in the workplace. And the research showed that 80% of women of color hide one or two or three aspects of themselves. 70% of white women cover some aspect of themselves, and 50% of white men. So what does that mean? So we were talking about this earlier. So in one of my clients, Salesforce.com, their CEO of the Americas, was talking about this covering. And he said, oh my God, I'm a white man and I cover. When I go to my son's basketball game or soccer game in the afternoon, I tell everyone I have a meeting. And he said, I'm covering that I have two boys that are both in soccer and I coach one of their teams. So I'm going to start to uncover. And through uncovering, if the leader uncovers, then you give permission to everyone else around you to uncover. And so that's really the conversation that really resonates with people. The key thing in today's leadership is, how do we support people to show up to work and be their whole selves? Because when you have to hide aspects of yourself, it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
No, I appreciate that. We saw the awards earlier about leaders are made, and that's such a strong tenet, obviously, of Warren's work and your own. The other phrase that Donna and I think about quite often is that leadership development starts early and it lasts a lifetime. And especially when we look out and we've got so many generations, as well as so much diversity in this room, I wondered if you'd speak a bit to our students about how to really kickstart that journey. What advice would you give?
That's a great question, right? Because I always say, and I think I mentioned this to the group when we were talking a little bit earlier, but I do believe that every one of us is born with a package of gifts. And our job as human beings is to live a life where we open up that package and share our gifts with the world. And, I had at the university, at the Center for Leadership where I knew Warren, I'll just give you guys an example that really touched me. There was a gentleman, a young man who worked for us. He was our CFO, and he turned 50, and we had a big celebration for his birthday. And afterwards, to a few of us, he said, you know, I'm 50 years old and I got a finance degree because my mom thought that that would be good for me to do. And I'd always have a job. And he said, I'm 50 years old. And he said, I have been living a life that is not mine. That is my mother's life. I'm a creative guy. I'm a gay man. And I want to be free to be me. And that stuck with me because how many of us spend our lives trying to live somebody else's expectation, our parents, society, culture, whatever it is, and we go through life. And the one thing about getting older is, damn, life goes fast. You know, 1 minute you're sitting in college class, and the next minute you're 50. And you're like, how did that happen? And then 60. And you're like, okay, this is really going way too fast. But the thing about it is, so don't spend time living somebody else's life. And that's what I think leadership is about, and the self-knowledge and everything Warren used to talk about, that leadership is the same as is becoming a fully integrated human being. Who are you? What gives you energy? What is the gifts that you want to give to the world? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? What are you not good in? You know, find out it's just as important to find out what you're good at as you're not good at, and understand that. So that's what I would say to students is you're on the beginning of your beautiful journey of discovering who you are and the contributions you want to make to the world. And it's okay to fail, because failure is only data to your true self. You know, one quick story, when I was at Bentley University, I ran the Center for Women in Business, and I had a student come visit me, and she was 19, and she came because she was failing her accounting class. And Bentley is a business university, and kids go there to get finance and accounting and marketing and all that stuff. So she comes in and she's beside herself and she's sobbing. And so I sat with her on the couch. I said, okay, tell me what's happening. I'm failing my accounting class. So I said, well, do you like accounting? She goes, no, I hate it. And I go, well, why are you getting an accounting degree? My mother thought it would be a good idea, and she's a partner at Deloitte. I go, okay, but do you want to be an accountant? She goes, no, and she's crying. I go, no, this failure of your accounting class is the best news you could ever imagine. She's like, what do you mean? She's, I'm failing. I go, yeah, failing to yourself. You don't want to be an accountant. Why? And how lucky are you to figure it out at 19 and not wake up 10 years down the road at 30 on the partner track in something that you don't like and don't love and don't want to do? So she ended up transferring to another school and going a whole different direction. But that's our job too, is to help everyone around us step into their authenticity as well.
You know, you just connected so many of these different pieces, and I'll give you a little more information. I think you already know this, but right at UC, we invented co-op. We believe in experience-based education, that you need to go out and come back. And when you say, man, I hated that, we say, okay, now we can talk. What are we going to do with that, right? How are we going to adjust? And, but also by going out, you have those crucible moments, and you probably have some failures. And how do we get back to the first question, right? Introspective. And thinking, pausing enough to think, instead of beating myself up, what do I learn from that? And how do I work through that in more powerful ways? And when we think about that, Betsy, I mean, you've had a beautiful and winding journey, as we all these students will as well. I wonder if there are particular decisions, I'm going to push you further, like on the example you gave, where you've realized you might actually have to seek out the crucible. I mean, put yourself in a more challenging position. Or maybe it's some of the conversations you spoke with some remarkable leaders, if you wanted to share one of their stories with you about how they took advantage, sought out a challenging experience to push them along that journey.
I mean, listen, life, and I said this to the students today, but I really believe it. There is nobody that has, I don't care what your career looks like, that doesn't have so many twists and turns, skin knees. And I have plenty of skin knees. And, you know, I always say some of us in the leadership field are in this field because we are here to teach what we need to learn. right? And so it's an evolving thing. So the things I teach about are often what my own story, right? But I remember one of the stories that I remember Barack Obama sharing, which really touched me because when he was a senator, and I was at the Kennedy School at Harvard, we took 25 students David Gergen and I took from our center, took 25 students to do a Washington, D.C. trip. And it was really fun. And we went up to Capitol Hill and we met all these people. And Obama was a brand new senator. And so we went to his office and it's 25 students and sitting with him. And that was the first time I met him, actually. And I thought was really interesting. The takeaway from that was that here he's a new senator, right? And he's hot stuff because he gave that speech in 2004, and now he's a new senator. And there's people are kind of talking about maybe he'll be the next president. So it's heady stuff. And he's sitting with us, and he chooses to talk about failure. And he says to everybody, "Yeah, my first." He had been a state senator, and then he ran for Congress against Congressman Bobby Rush, was a Chicago congressman, and and basically he lost badly. And so he told the students, he said, "You know what? I know I'm sitting here, I'm a U.S. senator now, but let me tell you about my loss to Bobby Rush." He said, "And I was in my ego," and he said, "I lost badly." And he said, "Michelle was furious at me." And then he went on to say that he went to the Democratic Convention in 2000 in LA. He goes, "We had no money. I go to get a ticket or make a change at the airport. My credit card got declined." And he said, "That's what putting your head up means. Sometimes you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. Your wife's going to be mad at you, and you pick yourself up and you figure it out." And that was the story that he shared with the students. Not, "Let me tell you how I won the race. Let me tell you the feedback I'm getting from the big speech in Boston," or, nothing. And I thought that's about authenticity. That was his moment, right? Of like, wow, how do I take that failure, and turn it into my next step? How do I pick myself up and keep going? Yeah. Yeah.
The final questions I'd love us to explore a bit are really around purpose and legacy. It's something, especially purpose, is something we hear all the time with leaders, since I'm in Seneca and others. But you and I have spoken before, and I think with Kate, about Warren really did think about his legacy. And in fact, it's something I think we can all learn of. Actually, you should be thinking about it, because it's really, what are you leading that's going to last, right? What are you working on that's going to leave a bigger impact? But he also, I think this was I'm going to let you share it. This is about his generosity. Will you? Do you know, or I can do it so you don't have to guess. Warren, I think at one point said he wanted to be remembered as generous company. So in his 21 books and on all this work, 28, that he wanted to be remembered as generous company. I wonder if you'd say a bit. I think that speaks volumes for how he thought about purpose and legacy.
Oh, Kate, that is when Warren was asked how he wanted to be remembered. He said generous company. And I love that, because that is so him. But the other thing about Warren, he was generous company because he found everybody interesting. He used to always say, to be interesting is to be interested. He used to say that a lot. To be interesting is to be interested, which is why in the video he's like, if you can't make someone you're sitting next to interesting. But he was, the beautiful things that he used to do to engage people in the human relationship, which was like, he'd have people over for dinner and he would put a question underneath the plate. And he even did that. I remember Spencer Johnson, the author of Who Moved My Cheese, and he used to tell the story how his two little sons came over and Warren they were like 9 and 10, and he put questions under their plate to have this conversation and to have this connection. And so he was generous because he was interested in everyone around him and what people thought and who they were. And I haven't seen you in 2 months. Tell me something that you've discovered about yourself since I saw you last. He used to ask that question. And so you'd get around, like, I was obsessed with him. Like, I was obsessed with him because he made me feel that I mattered. He made me feel like when I was contemplating writing a book, I didn't really see myself as an author. And I would go to him and I'd say, what do you think of my idea? What do you think? And he was always like, no, no. He was my biggest supporter, my biggest. So he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And then he supported me. He wrote the afterword to my book. That he's a very busy guy. He had 1 million people asking him to write forwards, afterwards, this, that. But that's what he was. He was completely generous company. He'd come through the office in the Center for Leadership at Harvard, and he would stop and say hi to people. You know, he cared about people. It was just who he was. It wasn't manufactured. It was just who he was as a human being. And the thing about him, when you talk about purpose, his passion for leadership and discovery was incredible. I remember having dinner with him as he was writing his last book on his memoir. And I happened to be in LA, and we met for dinner at the Ritz-Carlton in Marina del Rey. And he was so excited because they had just picked his title. The title, yes. And the title of his memoir was Still Surprised. Isn't that the best? At 80, he goes, I'm still surprised at 85. And so that's who he was. He was passionate about his work. And he, the last time I saw Warren, I went to visit him at his home, and it was about maybe 6 months before he passed away. And he said, I'm thinking about a new book idea. And I was, no, tell me. And he's, because he's always thinking, so excited. He said, I think we need to have a book on being a first-class noticer. First-class noticer. So noticing the people around you, noticing what's going on, being willing to ask people questions, right? That was Warren, and it was infectious. Who he was as a human being, and what he did in the leadership field. And what I think is so important is the very things that Warren Bennis was teaching about, talking about, are the very things that the leadership field is talking about today. He was way ahead of his time. So the fact that you are keeping the legacy of his leadership alive in this university is a gift. It's like such a gift. Like I love being here with you all to think about how to keep that alive and to keep that teaching, his writing, his books alive today, because it's what we need. It's the leadership style we need. Kindness, curiosity, listening, care, becoming an integrated human being. That's what leadership's all about. And that's what I think a university is about, teaching that to young people to go out. We have to count on young people to go out and make our world better. We haven't done the best job here, this older generation. We're kind of in a mess right now. When Warren, I would love Warren. He would be dying right now with Ukraine, wouldn't he, Kate? Like, and another dictator in Russia. And anyways, so I'm going to stop rambling and turn this back.
No, but I think that is just so critical, because it's one thing to say we're starting a leadership movement. It's another thing to say what kind of leaders are we moved to develop. And I think you just went through a number of adjectives that all of us need to take to heart. And I know we have so many faculty here as well, and staff and leaders as well in the community. Oh, we had so many. One of the most interesting things, we had so many interesting things actually today, but in the women's leadership session, we ended up having quite a bit of discussion about the need for women, and truly for everyone. And in fact, it challenged me to just start thinking, how are we doing this at UC to really help students have difficult conversations? How do we practice having courageous discussions, working through conflict on a regular basis? Because we talk so much about the power of experience, but we might actually have to create a bit more of that so that we get better. Because if not, we're going to be increasingly polarized and not doing the really heavy, important lifting in between. What else did you get out of that? I thought that was beautiful.
What did you say?
About the working through conflict and difficult conversations, I think was just such a good takeaway for all of us.
Yeah, no, it was really, when you think about leadership, that's part of being leaders, is you have to be able to deal with conflict, and you can't ignore it. And, what you resist persists. And so in the conversation today, it's like, how do we teach leaders that when there's a conflict with somebody, how do you address it? How do you have those uncomfortable conversations when you don't want to, or when you don't like the person, right? And that's part of leadership, is like, nip it in the bud early. Have the conversation. Don't make assumptions about why someone's acting the way they are. Go to them. We talked about not sitting at the water cooler gossiping about what you think somebody is doing or why they're doing it, and go to them directly. These are skills. You can have, I think one of the important things is you can have all the knowledge, the degrees. I used to see at Harvard, and I was there, like, people would have multiple degrees and PhDs and all that. But what they were hungry for at our Center for Leadership was, but how do I lead? I have the technical skills, but how do I tap into the human skills, right? And part of that is being able to have these difficult conversations, take on dealing with people that you don't necessarily get along with. How do you then deal with that? Have that conversation, build allies, build relationships. So all of that is so important. And I think for you guys to take that on at Cincinnati, here at the business school, you have leaders come out as, different kind of leaders, the skill and there's lots of ands. There is.
We're good. Thank you so much. Thank you. And one of the students, Sophia, I don't know if Sophia is here from the basketball team, had just a beautiful comment in today's session that it feels right now, which is the paradox of knowledge, that the more you know you don't know. And leadership feels that way, right? The more we start to pick up rocks and realize how much we have to learn, the more we know we have to learn. But that's a good thing. That's going to continue making us better at leaders, but also at leadership development. And we'll keep pushing on that. And with that, I want to say a great big thanks to Betsy. Can we give her an applause, please? And now we're going to switch to an interactive efforts.
Yeah, let's also give it up for Dean Mary Ann Lewis. This has been amazing tonight. It's so awesome to hear from two amazing women and all that they have done, but just having you both pour into the students here. Betsy, you have never been to Cincinnati before, but hearing your passion and your care for the students, it's really touching as being a part of the University of Cincinnati community. So we are so thankful for all of this. I hope all of you took some amazing things away. And this is where we want to transition into a time of discussion to actually push you to put this stuff into action. You heard about it. You heard everything that Betsy was saying, but we want you to turn this into something tangible. Let this change your life. Let this be something that is actually going to affect you tomorrow. So in your table groups, if you're just sitting with one or two other people, go hop in some other groups. Let's combine these groups. We have up to 8 seats at each table, but we want to give you a chance to discuss. We're going to give you about 15 to 20 minutes to discuss before we bring it back up here. But we really want you to share a story of someone in your life who inspired you, motivated you, or made you want to be a better person. Think about one word that represents that story. So please, I invite you now, go into your table groups and begin this discussion time. It's going to be a great time of experiential learning.
we're going to call you back. Hopefully you had some wonderful conversation. And Betsy's got some final insights around this conversation.
Hi, everyone. So what we did was Alex and Dean Lewis went around and kind of picked up some of the words that you all were sharing about your word to describe a leader that inspires you. And so we wanted to go through some of the words when we think about head and heart leadership. And we just want to throw this out and just see what you guys think. And it's kind of a group exercise. When I throw out a word and you respond whether it's head, heart, or both. Okay. Rule breaker. Both? Oh, more. Okay. Both? Okay. So maybe it's a both. Right. Here's perseverance. Heart. Okay. Driven. Heads. Two. How many heads? Two. Heart. Both? Uh-huh. Both. To both? Do you say both? Okay. Okay, generosity. That's an easy one, right? Resilience. Head. Heart. Both. Okay. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Inspiration. Okay. Let's go for both. Heart. Head. Inspiration. Heart. Both. Heart. Appreciative. Determined. Huh? Change. I think it's both, yeah. Selflessness. Selflessness. Heart. Heart. Caring. Grit. Empowering. Okay, all right. Brave. Brave heart. And what do we, yeah? Compassionate. Okay. All right, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 words. And we only had, wait, one, we had no, just head only. You guys, so, okay, of the 15 words, you did not have a single word that was just head. So, okay, Jeannie, say that again.
Well, I can repeat what Jean just said. She said, one she noticed is that the softer words we tended to. Did it turn off? Okay. And the words that were came out as both. Feminine? Is it?
So what I love it is these words came from you, came from the audience, of what motivated you. It's either the words that were either both head and heart or heart that motivated you. And so it's amazing to see what motivated you. And then you think about it in your leadership journey, to go back to the things that touched you, and you go back to the stories, whatever the stories you were in this exercise of someone in your life who inspired you. What was that, right? And so we want to have in this Bennis Institute is the opportunity for experiential learning. And I think this is a fun exercise to try, just to kind of get your head around. Yes. Thank you.
We grow into our the whole integral whole.
Yes.
Maybe we lean toward a.
Right. Oh. Right. Well, it's all about becoming the integrated leader. That's the whole purpose here. And knowing as a leader, sometimes you need to dial up your head part of your being, because that's what it calls for: strategy, data, science, resilience, focus, and when to call up the part of your heart that people need to be cared, heard for. You need to be vulnerable to connect. And what's your people strategy? So it's being able to, as a leader, to be able to assess each situation and make a decision on what's needed at that time. So, but it's amazing that most of us are not motivated and inspired by just the head. And that's the point of this exercise, is to show you where you're motivated to and inspired by someone in your life who touched your heart, and your humanity was mostly from the heart. So.
Remember the timing. All right, we're going to hand it off to Donna. Can we say thank you again for Betsy? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Betsy and Dean Lewis. What an amazing evening we've had tonight. And I want to share with you our plans for the future. And you've heard about the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute. We will officially be launching the Institute in the fall. So what is this Institute? It is, of course, meant to continue the legacy of Warren Bennis. But our vision is to transform leaders, our students, for a better tomorrow by harnessing the legacy of Warren Bennis, who said that leaders were made and not born. And we think that we are particularly positioned here at the University of Cincinnati to help create leaders because our students are on co-op, because they are engaged in experiential learning, because we are in the heart of the city. We are doing the work. We are engaged in leadership. And so we want to create a movement where everybody begins to see themselves as leaders. Many of my students think that leadership is about a position or a title. But just as Alex said at the beginning of this evening, we believe that you are all leaders, that you all can be and should be leaders. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that through an interdisciplinary institute. It is housed in college, but it is for everyone, for all of our students, evidence-based on the most up-to-date research in leadership development, and we are going to engage in experiential of what we do best here at the University of Cincinnati. We'll have 3 focus areas. We will, in the center, of course, because we place students in the center, priority is going to be providing programming, workshops, opportunities, experiences for our students, but also showcasing and highlighting what's already being done. I'm in the psychology department. We have a degree in organizational leadership. We want to elevate that program. We want to elevate all of the leadership opportunities that students have on this campus and help them connect the dots. Second, we want to provide executive education and leadership training and development for our alumni, for our community members. We know that so many people look to us at the University of Cincinnati to help them with our thought leaders. So who better to provide some of this training and some of these experiences and connections with our students? That's our focus area number 2. And then finally is research, to engage in scholarship and to make sure that we are engaged in the best leadership development for our students based on that research data. So that's our goal, that's our mission. And here are some things to look forward to as we launch in the fall. We are going to be conducting a pilot program with the College of Engineering to focus on group coaching and providing engineers with coaching skills. We will be in our learning communities for our first-year students and helping those students begin to see themselves as leaders and develop their leader identity. We are going to be working on a number of initiatives in the community with leader. For example, we are kicking off an inclusive leadership training cohort program this spring in partnership with the Mayerson Academy, who's just over in the new Digital Futures building. We will also be going for a Carnegie classification. Carnegie is the classification institute for Research One and research institutions. They also have a number of voluntary classifications. And so we will be striving for that award, which will be university-wide. We will be conducting a research study involving 4 different countries on women's empowerment. And of course, you will all be coming back for next year's Warren Bennis Leadership Experience. Now I'd like to invite the student team up, as well as Matt, to help us close.
Thank you, Donna. Before I continue, I just wanted to say we are selling both Betsy Myers, Dr. Crowbot Mason's, and Dr. Marianne Lewis's book in the back afterwards. So please find a book if you would like one. There's also flyers and paperwork, more about it when you leave. To all the stakeholders, faculty, staff, visitors, and of course, students, I want to give you my sincere thank you for being a part of this year's event. There's a famous picture that I love of Warren when he was at UC of him. And keep in mind, he was the president of the university, of him teaching a class, sitting on a desk with all of the students circled around him. Warren was just ahead of his time. The inclusivity and comforting environment that Warren created was truly an inspiration. But none of what happened tonight would be possible if we didn't have a dedicated and driven student team. If students team could please come forward. Each one of these members played an integral part of what happened tonight. Alex and I could not be more proud and thankful for each one of you. Now thank you, and please give them one more round of applause. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve." You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. I want to leave you with this. Learn from those around you. Take heart in who you are. Help live a life of service and leadership. And remember, leaders are made, not born. Thank you for being a part of the Bennis story.